What's going on, YouTube? This is Jay the Barber back again with another YouTube video about aesthetic inception. Today's cut is going to be on my brother. This is my younger brother. He looks totally older than me though, but that's alright. Alright, so today's cut, we're going to be freestyling this cut. Since I know his texture pretty well, I'm just going to be freestyling this cut all the way. And here I'm going in, I think, with the zero speedo guide on my detachables. And I'm just debulking the areas. I mean, he's learning how to cut his hair himself, so it's also kind of a little bit like different of a growth pattern just based off of that alone. So that's pretty decent. So I don't have to really do much when we're going into this, and I'm trying to freestyle it as well. And I mean, any barbers out there, I mean, I know you guys know already, just using a detachable alone, I mean, you can't really adjust it. You just gotta be creative at that point. But here I'm still going in with my adjustables. I gotta make sure I get it as smooth as possible. And here we're trying to make sure we get a burst effect out of this mid taper, just so that it's prominent but still also blending into the rest of the look. You don't want to go too high into it, so making sure I'm just using the corners of my blades, debulking the areas as much as possible before going in again and actually trying to transition those guides. Here I'm just making sure I get the base clear first. I'm not really stressing anything just because I already know what I'm going in with. So now I'm going in with the 0-0 guide on the speedos. Kind of complicated of a process to use, just because there isn't as many as, like, as I would say, maybe like an Andes or a Walls type of guys. You kind of have to use a little finesse when you're using them. Now, as you can see, it's kind of transitioned already. Here I'm just making sure I clean up into the fro look. Just want to clean it up a little bit. You don't want any stragglers hanging. I mean, I gotta have a silhouette to it just based off of his head shape. So I'm just making sure I get that silhouette transition first before I go in and do anything else. Now, still trying to make sure I flick at that guide as much as possible. For me personally, it takes me a little bit longer just to do a taper because I don't flick directly into everything. I mean, my goal is to speed it up, but I mean, that's all right. I could get that accomplished pretty soon. And here, just making sure I prepped it before going on to anything else. Now on the nape taper, transitioning everything again with that zero, flicking into it, just making sure I clean everything up. I mean, it's going to be some harsh guys, but you have to mess up to make it perfect at the end of the day. And it's just a process. So here, I mean, it still looks transition, but just a little bit. And I'm taking my time with it. I still have the same one on there. I'm not really trying to rush in and move on to the next. I mean, I just want to make sure that I use it as efficiently as possible before going into the next step. So here I'm going in with the 0-0-0 guide. And I mean, I'm going to transition. That's taking a long time. I ain't gonna hold you. But I'm making sure I flick into it, but I don't want to go into it too heavily just because I know already that this transition isn't all the way finished yet. So here I'm going in using my adjustables. Usually just using the adjustables on the bottom guys, and if I have to get in between anything, that is equivalent to me actually using, let's say, like an Andes or a wall, just to a wall guide, Andes or a wall guide, just to get that transition. So making sure that I keep everything flowing in the same direction, that the natural growth direction. And I'm not really stressing the bulk up above, like around his occipital bone, just because I already know that I can transition that later on. I'm just trying to make sure I get the base transition, then the skin transition, and then the next one up, and then afterwards the first step that I used before. And still just making sure I'm using the corners of the blade. I'm really just honestly teetering at it, just making sure that I get the best usage out of it before going on to the next step. And it's transitioning pretty smoothly. So here you see me using the comb just to do the clipper over comb, making sure that I get an even transition on it, just because I don't have to actually add more guides. I mean, I'm already using the comb. I might as well just use it to the best of its ability. And that's what this freestyle is about. I mean, just trying to do less, but still making the best of it. And since this is longer hair, it is kind of harder just to transition into it and give it a specific silhouette that is the same as their specific head shape. And that's typically what I try to do with all my clients. And here is just me going into depth a little more with it, just because it's just a smoother transition all the way around. And me cleaning up these areas is just me going with the natural growth pattern. I mean, you can see it's layering and layering. So I'm just making sure I get it as layered as possible before I'm actually ready to go in and do anything else with it. I'm just notching at it, cleaning it up a little bit, going in with the clip over comb, making sure everything is well put together, just because I know at the end of the day it's gonna transition, so I don't have to rush the process and possibly, you know what I'm saying, dig into it way more than I need to. And here are the same steps as the previous nape and the right taper. Still just making sure I do go in and clean it up as much as possible. And as I said before, I mean, he was cleaning it up himself, like just, you know what I'm saying, tapering it, I mean, cutting it and making sure it was straight before like he had to do anything or something like that. But it wasn't as if he had a different perspective. And I mean, me personally, cut my own hair, I totally get that. So I have to make sure it's as even as possible, even though it may have to be cut a certain way. I'm still gonna make sure that the transition is balanced from the edge up to the taper, all the way up to the silhouette. Now here, still making sure I'm using the corners of my blade when I'm going in with the detachables. Here, still making sure I'm using the corners of my blade, even though I'm making the skin transition now. And it's really just about flicking at it, notching at it, and being patient with the process. Not really worrying about how long it's taking unless you have to. But I mean, just for this particular freestyle, I mean, the taper is flawless, fits perfectly. And now just knocking it down just so I can get it as smooth as possible. But I do make sure I don't just dig into it. I'm going into it off of the silhouette onto the scalp, off of the scalp. And now still using the corners. I think this is the 0. And I'm just making sure I get it as clean as possible. Now with the 000, I'm making sure I clean up into it some, still using the corners because I don't want to make any other harsh guides. And I can still use the clip over comb method with it, and it still looks nice. Now I'm picking it and just making sure I lay everything down smoothly for this next transition, and just keeping everything in shape. And I'm not really stressing the taper yet because I do want to make sure I'm still able to have enough there where I can frame the edge up instead of having to dig into it too much just because one part isn't long enough, you know what I mean? So now blow drying it, making sure I get everything dry as fast as possible. And for his particular edge up, we do make sure you go in from where his I totally forgot what the thing totally forgot. But anyways, it isn't a pushback. You know what I'm saying? Make sure where he wanted his edge up was where he wanted his edge up at, and the process. I mean, it was just smooth. I mean, you can see it was just a nice transition. And here, this part is. I did go in a little closer because I didn't know where it was 100%, so I just made sure I went in low enough to where I can raise it up where I needed to, instead of just guessing. And I'm just trying to get it as close as possible before analyzing it again. I mean, it's at a decent length, but still have to go in and make sure I get it as symmetrical as possible. And the taper looked fresh. I mean, there's areas to clean up, but the taper looked fresh already. And this is why I'm edging them up for it now, because I don't notice any of the imperfections unless it's close to finish. You know what I mean? So then I just make sure I get everything framed first. Start on this lowest curve, and then I matched it with his longest curve, and then we just got everything as symmetrical as possible. And the edge look fresh already. I ain't do nothing else to it. I just edged it up, and I do modify my trimmers and my blades so they don't hit as if it was just fresh out the box. So that's why I'm able to get a better transition on my edge up. Even though it was a lot of hair, it looks like he already then just about finished getting his shape up. And here, cleaning up the beard, making sure I arch it to where it is naturally best fit. And here, doing the same thing all around. The taper, the process, everything looks totally neat. Here on the nape, I do still make sure I go in and clean up that taper a little bit, just because it is where I just left it alone so I can make sure that whenever I go in for the edge up, I have enough there for the edges. And then the nape taper be hitting. I totally forgot. I don't even think I used spritz on this nape taper or any holding spray at all. I totally forgot. Here, going around the rest of the edge up, cleaning everything and just making sure that it's tight. Now I'm trying to get this one as sharp as possible because it's almost there, but I was just framing it earlier just so I could make sure I knew where I wanted both of them to align. Now going in with the same process, cleaning up at it. It's just crispy. He has a nice beard growth as well. So then his looks totally crispy. Like whenever you're going in for the edge up, and making sure I clean up everything in between that, where I'm gonna be going in for the nape taper as well, just because I don't want to have anything that can potentially take attention off of the haircut. So I make sure I clean up as many areas as possible. I mean, whatever areas need to be cleaned up, that's the areas that I clean up, just because I want the potential to be there 100%. I don't want it to be where you have to, like, just so happen to notice something. No. Just look at the cut, and you'll just appreciate the cut. Still using the same process on the mustache with the trimmers. I do prefer going upside down with the trimmers because it kind of make it as if I was doing an actual lineup instead of trying to do it under, if that makes sense. But now the same process as earlier, cleaning up the naturally around the curvature of the ear, cleaning up into the taper a little bit, just making sure everything is transitioned to where whenever I do go in for anything else, it's only detailing. It isn't anything else pertaining to the cut. So now I'm moisturizing it, making sure I put a little bit of product in there, and we're gonna curl it. So here I'm using the the curl sponge by Kiss, and it is definitely professional. And I mean, it takes a little bit of time just to get it to a certain look. But earlier, I mean, I made the silhouette to where I can go into it just enough to where it'll look the part. Now the edge up, just making everything as close to the edge as possible. I don't want to leave any hairs behind, so I'm just making sure I clean up everything that I need to clean up. And I mean, since I did do the edge up with the trimmers, I didn't intentionally make it as sharp or try to go in as much on it because I knew I was gonna go in later on with the razor and then clean everything up. And I do make sure I clean up behind the beard. If that makes sense. I mean, I ain't really got a beard yet, so I mean, it doesn't really pertain to me yet. But clean up the eyebrows a little bit. Now, just still making sure I teeter at this edge up because I do want to look at it as if it was one. I don't want to look at it as if I'm looking at two different edge ups. So here, this is the cut, befores and afters. Here's the edge up.